Awesome. Where are you all from? Oh, you are? Oh, okay. Yeah, I grew up in Baltimore, and then I was in Richmond, Virginia. Yeah, they are.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here today. So just getting started. Our host today will be asking you all to kind of bring your chairs in and come in nice and close. All right, thank you. It's just this. Yeah.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming and coming early to be a part of this presentation. We really appreciate it and are excited to talk more about Japanese Americans supporting Black Reparations. No, it's okay. Yeah. So quickly here today, we have Akemi Kochiyama with Yuri Kochiyama Solidarity Project. We have Dreesen He with the Lions Can't Win Coalition, and also all the things. We could go on. I'm Emily. I'm with Student for Solidarity, the National Negro Reparations Coalition, and the New York Day of Remembrance Committee. And then we have Kathy Masaoka, Nikkei Progressive ICRR Reparations Committee, and then the National Nikkei Reparations Coalition. Mia Iwataki, founding member of NCRR, National Nikkei Reparations Coalition, and then Regina Boone, right here, who is a Richmond Free Press photojournalist, granddaughter of Tsuruju Miyazaki, for Howard Detention Center and Rohwer Jerome Prison. So we also want to acknowledge that Jerome and Rohwer are on occupied Osage and Oksappa Mazal land, and we recognize all the ancestors whose lives continue to teach us. Also recognizing the people in Little Rock in this community and all that, Black folks here have gone through too. And yeah, so we wanted to start by just going around, sharing, everyone here to share your name, where you're coming from, and also who you're carrying with you today and bringing to this space. So we can start with Mia over here.
Hi. Can you hear without this?
No, use the mic.
It's only going to be really short. I'm Mia Iwataki. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and today I'm bringing with me my dad, who was in the 442nd training at Camp Robinson, and my mom.
I'm Akemi Kochiyama. I'm from Harlem, New York. I am the granddaughter of Bill and Yuri Kochiyama, and Yuri was interned here or incarcerated here at Jerome, and my grandfather Bill was incarcerated at Tulsa.
Use the mic. The virtual audience can't hear you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Akemi Kochiyama from Harlem, New York. My grandparents are Bill and Yuri Kochiyama. Yuri Kochiyama was incarcerated at Jerome, and my grandfather Bill was incarcerated at Topaz.
Hi all, Dreesen Heap here. I reside on the East Coast between Connecticut and the DC area. I am bringing with me today Ivory Alice Dansby Urquhart, my late grandmother who was born and raised in Little Rock.
No, there's a whole audience. Oh. So keep it quick stuff. Sorry.
Linda Morris, Baltimore, Maryland. I'm bringing with me my family who's incarcerated in Jerome, Rohwer, and Manzanar.
Lauren Sumida, I live in Astoria, New York. I'm bringing with me my Sumida family who are incarcerated in Rohwer and my Washino side at Tule Lake.
Kathy Masaoka, I'm bringing with me two people that were very important in redress, Lillian Nakano and Bert Nakano, and they are both at, I believe, Jerome and Rohwer. And then, of course, my family that was at Gila and Manzanar.
Hi, Ako Castuera. I'm from Los Angeles, California. Hi. And I'm bringing with me my grandmother, Yeko Dakazaku's family, and also my partner, Rob Sato's Sato family.
You don't have to stand up, just pass the mic.
Yeah, we could just pass it.
Hi, I'm Pollyann Nakamura Johnston, and I bring with me my parents and my brother who passed away at 41, so he was very young. Both my parents are gone now, and I was born here at Rohwer.
My name is Vince Yamamoto. I was 16 when I was incarcerated in Jerome, Arkansas. I'm lucky still to be alive.
I'm Jenny Yamamoto Syfax, his daughter, and I brought him.
Mariel Tsukamoto, I was 5 years old, and my whole family was in Jerome, Arkansas. And my mother is her mother's cousin. cousin.
I'm Rita Narimatsu Inoue, and I was in Rohwer when I was 3 or 4 years old. I have very few memories of it, but this is the first time I'm back in Arkansas. I live in Portland, Oregon now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Debbie Kajiyama from the San Francisco Bay Area, Ohlone land, and I'm bringing with me my grandparents, uncles, great uncles, who were in Rohwer and subsequently in Tule Lake.
Hi, my name is Saki Lee, and I'm from San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm bringing with me my great-grandparents who were in Rohwer and Tule Lake.
Hi, I'm Robert Watt. I'm from Denver, originally from Southern California. Bringing with me my parents. One, Bob, was in Jerome and Rohwer, and my mother, Aiko, was in Gila.
I'm Rachel Watt, his daughter. I use gender pronouns, and I'm coming from Fort Collins, Colorado. And I bring with me the same folks you mentioned, but also folks who were incarcerated in Tule Lake and Boston as well.
I'm Ron Shintani. I'm from Torrance, California. It's a suburb of LA. I was born in Jerome.
So I'm Patsy Shintani, Ron's wife, and I was born in Ogden, Utah. So our family was never interned because we were off the coast, but I find this I'm very impressed, and I'm really glad I came with my husband.
I'm Lori Sasaki from Oakland, and bringing with me my Sasaki side from Jerome and the Kazokas that were incarcerated in Poston.
I am Barney Sasaki. I live in San Diego. I'm bringing my Fukuji Sasaki family. There were 8 of us, including my brother here, who carries me a lot.
I'm tired. I'm Ken Sasaki. And I'm from Torrance, California. And glad to be here.
I'm Paula Fujiwara, and I'm from San Francisco, California. I had 2 uncles here at Jerome Rohwer, and most of my family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, parents, etc., were at Tule Lake. So it's my second time here at the pilgrimage.
Hi, Julie Aho.
and currently from the Piscataway San Francisco Lands, also known as Chevy Chase, Maryland. And it's my second time. I'm honored to be here, and I'm bringing with me my ancestors who were incarcerated at Minidoka and at Tule Lake.
Hi, I'm Marcia Johnson, and I'm from a suburb of Washington, D.C. I'm honoring my Samita grandparents and my parents and my aunts and uncles. And my Endo family was at Heart Mountain and Hamachi.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mia Osaki. I share she, her pronouns. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, originally from Los Angeles, and I bring my father's family, his brothers, sister, grandparents who are in Rohwer and Jerome, and my mother's family, Siamas, who were in Minidoka.
My name is Susan Nishi Stevens. I'm from Bow, New Hampshire. I grew up in Linden, California. I bring with me on my father's side the Nishis that were interned at Rohwer, and my mother's side the Niais that were interned in Hilo.
My name is Lisa Johnson Ponder, born in Chicago. I'm from Eugene, Oregon. I bring today with me the stories that I'm preserving from the Eugene Japanese American Memorial in Eugene that I helped create, and I'm also bringing my Tulsa ancestors.
Hey everyone, I'm Rob Busher, coming from Philadelphia. I bring here with me my Bachan's cousins, the Taji family, as well as the other relatives who were incarcerated at Minidoka, Crystal City, and posting camps.
Hi, I'm Becca Asaki, coming from Brooklyn, New York. And I'm bringing my grandfather, who was incarcerated at Jerome, and the entire Saki family that was at Jerome and Rohwer. And then my Sakaguchi family that was also incarcerated at Heart Mountain and Tule Lake.
Hi, my name is Kyle Dowley. I come from Brooklyn, New York, and I'm bringing with me the Asaki family who are at Jerome and Rohwer, among other places.
Hi, my name is Patty Honda. I currently live in Las Vegas. I'm representing my mom's family, the Temples, that went from Jerome and Tule Lake, and my father, who served in the MIS in China.
I'm Rachel Withers. I'm from Ogden, Utah, and I bring with me my grandfather, who served in the 442, and he was killed in Florence, Italy.
I'm Paul Takamoto. I'm from Maryland. I'm bring my mom, who's 97 and watching this in Maryland. And she was a 15-year-old at Jerome when Yuri Kochiyama started a girls group. And she's talked about her with great love her whole life.
Lisa Takamoto, Paul's wife, and bring with me my mother-in-law and her family.
I'm Molly Takamoto, so I'm with these people, and I'm bringing the same people. And hi, Grandma. I brought my knitting.
I'm Judy Matsuoka. I've lived here in Little Rock for the last 30 years, originally from Chicago. I bring with me my Matsuoka side of the family, my father's side of the family. My grandparents and uncle were at Jerome and then Rohwer, while my dad was in Camp Robinson doing basic training.
Hi, I'm Madeline Molyneux. I'm a world and American history instructor. I've been doing that for about 30 years, semi-retired. I'm here for the first time. I'm delighted and honored to be here among you. I suppose I could say my father, who also fought in Italy alongside the 442, who is deceased now, but I suppose I can say I represent him and my family. Thank you.
Oh, hi, I'm Katie Sambongi from Berkeley, California. So I represent my father's side, that's Sambongi's side, that was in Jerome, and my mother's side that was at Tule.
Hi, I'm Allison Sambongi, and I represent my grandfather and my grandma.
Hi, I'm Brian Sambongi. I'm here with my extended family. Again, my father's side, Sambongi, was here at Jerome, and my mom's side was at Tule Lake.
Hi, I'm Phil Sambongi. Tule Lake and Internment.
Richard Yoshikawa from Honolulu, Hawaii via Stockton, California. My parents, Richard and Helen Yoshikawa, were interned Rohwer.
Hi, I'm Leilani Sardina. I'm from New York City, and I'm bringing my great-grandparents, Yuri and Bill Kochiyama, who are at Jerome and Tulsa.
Hi, I'm Kainaima Williams, also from New York City, and I'm bringing with me my great-grandparents, also Bill and Yuri Kochiyama, and also on my other side of the family, the Arise. So the Arai family, the Nakahara family, and the Kochiyama family, who were at Jerome, Tule Lake, and Topaz.
I'm Malia Sardina. Kemi Kochiyama is my mom, and I'm also bringing in my great-grandparents, Yuri and Bill Kochiyama, at Jerome and Topaz.
I'm Jeffrey Yamaguchi. I live in Brooklyn, New York, but I'm from Stockton, California. Carrying with me my sister, actually, who's no longer with us, but just would have been so, well, she is here, I have to say, but she would have loved to have been a part of this. And my grandparents who are in Rohwer and their whole family. And I'm super excited to hand the mic over to my brother's son, my nephew, so take it away.
Hi, I'm Jackson Yamaguchi. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I'm also bringing my great-grandparents who were in Rohwer.
Hi, Eden Inoue Rani, and I'm daughter of Rita Narimatsu Inoue, and I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and this is my first pilgrimage.
I'm Mike Morris. I'm bringing my father-in-law, Paul Ishimoto, and my mother-in-law, May Asaki, and the Asakis, as well as their parents and family.
I'm Riley Galata. I'm from Laurel, Maryland, and I'm bringing Sandy Louis.
I'm Diane Honda. I'm coming from the Nashville, Tennessee area, originally from Southern California. I'm bringing my family from Poston, Hondas and Juarez, and my granduncle's family, Tule Lake, and my father, Santa Fe.
I'm Evelyn Butzka Davis. I'm from Kansas City right now, but I grew up in Chicago. I'm bringing my mother's entire family, including my grandparents, her three brothers, and her sister. And they were in, kind of covered it, Tule Lake, in the river, and Jerome.
Hi, I'm Janet Hutzika Love, and I'm bringing all of the same relatives that my sister is bringing. Jerome, Tule Lake, and Gila River.
Hi, I'm Reiko Davis. I'm here with my mother and my aunt, and I'm bringing with me Eileen Hutzika's family who, as they said, were in Jerome among other places.
Hi, I'm Ruth Ann Hughes, and I'm here with my my mother and all of her family, the Isakis. A lot of them, a lot of the Isakis were in the Jerome War, and many of them can't be here. Some are virtual and listening in and participating. And I'm from Coalsville, Maryland.
Hi, my name is Eiko Yoshikawa, and currently living in Chicago, but from Stockton. And I'm bringing the Yoshikawa side of the family, my dad's side, and the Takahashi side of the family.
I'm Becca Yoshikawa, and I'm with ACO and my husband Richard.
And hi, my name is Regina Boone, and I bring my grandfather, Tsuruju Miyazaki, who was incarcerated at here at Jerome and Rohwer. And the reason I know that about this is because a letter that my father sent to me that put me on this path years ago, and then later on. But I'm going to read a part of this letter, and then we'll continue. So my father wrote me this on January 31st, 1993, when I was AET on the JET program in Osaka, teaching English. So it says, "Dear Regina, I'm enclosing finally a photograph of your grandfather, along with copies of letters that he wrote to your grandmother. The letters are from many that he wrote to her while he was unjustly deterred during one of America's most horrible periods. My delay in getting this material to you may be related to the pain that is experienced when I review it. Also, I was reluctant to transfer this pain to you. I know that this is not at all scientific, but I believe your grandfather's spirit remains strong. It inspired you to want to go to Japan, and now that you are there, you feel compelled to satisfy an undying urge to know more about your heritage. Your grandfather's letters give convincing evidence that he was a good man, a smart man, a man who would not accept that which is not fair and just. I am proud of him. I know he did all that he could do for justice, as well as for his family, struggling against awful circumstances." In addition to his numerous letters that I mentioned, I also have copies of photographs of his relatives in Japan. He just goes on, but that just kind of sets the tone for why I'm here too.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing where you're coming from and also the ancestors that you're carrying to this pilgrimage and today's presentation. And yeah, maybe we could just give, a moment of silence just to honor the folks that we carry here and what it means to gather for our community. All right, thank you. And then also, I'm Emily, and the ancestors that I'm carrying are my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and my great-aunts and uncles that were in Minidoka. And then I feel like I just always carry my healthy ancestors and am grateful to be protected in this life. Alrighty. So, Mia?
Well, I think you can read all of today's workshop goals, and I'm just so glad you're here. And just from the introductions, I'm already feeling very emotional. And, this is a space where we want to, all of you here are the history. And all of us sitting here together with our sisters are the shared history that we all face. And so we want to, within that context, talk about how we built the movement for redress and reparations. We want to encourage conversations about our reparations and the connection between Black reparations and, all of us here today. And, we really invite you to join with us in our support for the work that we're doing now.
So in addition to hearing, really great information from folks who helped put together this workshop. We'll also have space for discussion. So just to share some of our discussion guidelines. So your ideas are important. Speak up and share the space. Respect each other's point of view and share what you learned with others. Yes, because it's very important that after today and in general, we're always talking about Black reparations. We weave it into our conversations. So please bring what you learned today to your people and communities.
Okay, just a couple of things before I introduce this video, is that there is a sign-in sheet that's going around. It's very important because we want to stay in touch with all of you. And I was supposed to pass these postcards out, but I will pass them out right after this. So the video clip that you're going to see is just maybe about 5 minutes of the Commission on Wartime, Relocation, and Internment of Civilians, the CWRIC hearings that were held in 1981 across the country, Alaska, and in the United States mainland, in 10 cities. Originally, it was just going to be in Washington, D.C. folks, but it was, felt that we demanded actually that it be held where Japanese Americans lived so that they could actually speak and tell their stories. Not everybody was really ready or willing to tell their stories initially, so it took a lot of encouragement from people like Bert and Lillian Nakano and other folks in JCL as well to encourage people to speak. So the hearings in Los Angeles, this is the Los Angeles hearings where the full hearings were videotaped. And we have them and you can access them on vcmedia.org, but all that information is on that flyer with the QR code that you got. So all the resources are there. But it was very important because this is the first time in many ways that people spoke about the camps after not speaking about it. And it was the first time that people like ourselves who were born after the camps heard these stories. And, so it was overwhelming in a lot of ways to hear it. And it was very moving and it was inspiring because many women, especially, I think, were so articulate and shared their emotions. So people like myself and Mia that were there, it really pushed us to say that we have to fight for reparations. It was really the trigger that really pushed people. So you're going to see Martha Okamoto, Iwan Yoshida, who was an orphan really in Alaska, Charlie Hamasaki, Tetsu Saito, who was Japanese speaking, it's all subtitled, and Amy Osaki Mass and Disruptors. And then the last one is Jim Matsuoka, and I just want to pay tribute to Jim, who was one of our founders of NCRR, National Coalition for Regions. He passed a couple of years ago, but he was sort of our, I want to say our North Star. He never gave up the fight. He continued to fight for Black reparations as well. So we're going to show the video and then continue after that.
I will try very hard, excuse me. My brother, as regards to my brother James, who was killed at Manzanar, I have never been able to talk about this. More people come up to me and say I must speak up. My children, even my own children, don't know that my brother was shot in the back.
On December 7, 1941, we were the only Japanese American family in Kodiak, Alaska. In a short time, my father and two uncles were arrested and put in concentration camps in the United States. We were not told where they were sent. They lost all their property, their house, their boats, equipment, and everything. I have never seen my father since. I have been trying to find him, been trying to locate him. And what happened to him, I don't know, and have been unsuccessful so far. I am very bitter about this. I have not seen my father since I was 11 years old. I am now 51 years old. I have missed my father very much. And I wonder, I wonder if he's alive today.
So you know what? When some of these old men said, the old men say, hey, they beating us because we're gonna die. They're gonna kill us. You know, just like the execution chamber, before you die. And that's what he said. So, but that's why I said, no, this country ain't gonna do that kind of stuff, man. You know, it's a democratic country, Bill of Rights, constitutional, and they all that just go with it, see? So they're not gonna do it. This is democracy. You know what one woman say? No, this is not democracy. This is democracy, he said. He's like, oh, my God, maybe this guy, you got a point, I said. No, you might be right. And then we get off the train. When we got off the train, 投げ込んで、ちょうど豚と同じようにされました。それで、量も足りません。これで生きていかれるかねと、すべて覆されてしまいました。家族の生活、安定、土台、覆されてしまいました。一家の柱となする主人と頼りにしていた長女も亡くなってしまいました。私は本当に苦労に不幸が多かったのですが、私たちの本当の苦労と経験とに対するアメリカ政府は償わなきゃならないと思います。
As a clinician in the field of mental health, I try to understand why so many Americans, Japanese and otherwise, were able to justify, rationalize, and deny the injustice and the destructiveness of the whole event. I have come to the realization that we lulled ourselves into believing the propaganda of the 1940s so that we could maintain our...
My name is Martha.
Able to justify, rationalize, and deny the injustice and the destructiveness of the whole event. I have come to the realization that we lulled ourselves into believing the propaganda of the 1940s so that we could maintain our idealized image of a benevolent, protective Uncle Sam. We were told that we were being put away for our own safety. We were told that this was a patriotic sacrifice necessary for national security. The pain, trauma, and stress of the incarceration experience was the psychological defense mechanisms of repression, denial, and rationalization to keep us from facing the truth. The truth was that the government we trusted, the country we loved, the nation to which we had pledged loyalty had betrayed us, had turned against us. Our natural human feelings of rage, fear, and helplessness were turned inward and buried.
Well, listen, I'm sorry. If we have outbursts like this, we're going to ask people to be removed. We know how some people are. Oh, so.
On a personal basis, I sincerely appreciate what you've done. But we're not talking on a personal basis right now. So you're trying to hurry me. And I will not be hurried by you as a representative of this government. Yeah. Well, now you want me to leave, you can tell me to leave. No, I'm not telling you. There's no point in getting... Well, don't rush us now. No, I'm not trying to rush you. As a matter of fact, I think... I've been rushed by this government enough. Well, sir, I want to assure you... If you didn't want this position, you volunteered for it. Well,
These were the commission hearings that we held in LA, and it transformed my life. I saw my community stand up and testify and tell their stories about what happened. There was rage, there was sadness, there was loss, there were disruptors. Everything that happened at those hearings unified our community. And I believe that the narratives, the stories that you all told were what really drove us to win reparations. These testimonies, you've seen a 5-minute clip. In Los Angeles, we had 3 days and 1 night. We fought for 1 night so working people were able to participate in the hearings. And to have 3.5 days of people telling their story, you could see clearly the nature of this United States government. And our people, I think, really began to recognize that we have a shared history with other communities of color, and that we have a responsibility to, not only fight for our own victory, but to fight for justice and equity and reparations for other communities. But we'll get into that. And I get so emotional every time I see this, and we wanted to ask folks how many of you here were able to attend a hearing in your own city? And we'd like to just hear maybe some of your responses.
Yeah, so while people are thinking, Akemi, did you want to share?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Just to get us started, my family definitely received reparations and was directly involved in sort of every part of it. I think growing up in our family in the 1980s, it was what was happening everywhere and everywhere we went in the JA community in New York. Everyone was involved. It was impossible not to know what was happening. And so I was lucky enough to be in a family that was talking about it constantly. My grandfather participated in the hearings, and they both participated in the hearings. And it was very real and relevant and part of what everybody I knew in the JA community in New York was involved in at that time. And I know that's very different for other people. And it was something that, they explained constantly, and it was a important, I think, part of my entire life as a young, when I was in middle school and in high school, was something we were talking about constantly. But yeah, I'd love to hear from other people how the reparations conversation went in your family.
Does anyone have? Oh, there we go. Thank you.
My mother, Mary Tsukamoto, was someone that was selected to speak in San Francisco. And I know that when she went, she said she heard stories that she couldn't believe And it did two things. Number one, the people of the United States for the first time heard some of the stories and realized what happened to us. We got media coverage, and for the very first time, the general public began to understand what had happened to us. So these hearings were extremely important. The second thing, I think it stirred within the Japanese community the belief that they had a right to speak. And when they heard stories that were similar to their experience, it brought the community together. And as the community came together, they began to speak to their friends, the non-Japanese friends, and we never could have made it unless we had the support of the general community. And I know my mother worked very hard. She got the mayor of Sacramento, the county supervisors together, and National JCL recommended that chapters begin to have what they call time of remembrance programs. And we were to educate the people in the community. And I know that my chapter, Florida JCL chapter, with the leadership that we had, invited the local politicians, and that made the difference. All of a sudden, people in the general public began to understand, and as we brought more people in every year, my mother also started an education program in the Elk Grove Unified School District where she was a teacher. And to this day, that school board votes every year a, what do they call it, a resolution to support the Time of Remembrance program for students in that district. The only school district that's done that, but since 1984, every fifth grader learns about internment. And I just want to point out that we couldn't do it ourselves. We had to get the general public. No more than African Americans can get their reparations without our help. I took the $20,000 and now I'm obligated. I have to be able to work to make sure that other people don't suffer the same thing.
As I was preparing to come to this is my first time. I talked to people about why I'm going, and they said, I didn't know anything about this, and nobody really knows a lot about what happened. And so it's really important that we do speak up and tell people about it.
Definitely.
I'm 80 years old, and I still run into people who don't know what the government did to us. I still run into people who don't. And I want to point out that even the Supreme Court justified it.
Yes, and the government justifying the violence, racial violence towards people builds upon a long legacy of the government doing that to Black people, Indigenous folks, and other communities of color. And I appreciate what was shared, that this work needs to be done in solidarity. And so that's why it's so important for folks in our community to continue to speak up for Black reparations and also acknowledge and honor all the communities, including Black lawmakers and other allies that made Japanese American redress possible. And so we must continue on that legacy within this movement today. Sorry, I feel like it's already close to 3, and I know that this panel is only supposed to be, or workshop is only supposed to be 2 hours. So I wanted to move on. Says we have so much amazing information that will really share more about the Black reparations movement today and how we can get involved. And that's also why we're here, in addition to being together and reflecting. All right, so I think folks got a piece of paper So if there's any questions or thoughts you have right now about Black reparations, you can write them on the note card. We'll give folks maybe 2 minutes to do that. Do we want to give people 2 minutes? Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And if folks want to share out loud too, are there any questions that you have about Black reparations that you hope will be answered in this workshop? So we want to give folks to ask questions, and hopefully we can get to it.
So as everyone's thinking about their questions or thoughts, I thought I'll add from my perspective. So my grandfather, he died before reparations were given to Japanese Americans, people of Japanese descent. And so I remember, so we were in Richmond, Virginia. My grandfather was arrested in Suffolk, Virginia. So there wasn't a big community there. And so I did learn that my father was half Japanese and Black. My dad explained the story to me initially when I was about 13. So then when this was happening, when the hearings were happening, I remember hearing this on the news and asking my father, who was a journalist, an editor, asking, so Dad, are you going to get reparations? And my father was like, he really couldn't answer that question because he didn't know. He was not in a community. He wasn't anywhere near anyone having these conversations. And I think for him, this was very hurtful. And then he really didn't have a clear answer to tell his child. And he being a truth teller, a man who was fighting for justice and righting wrongs he identified as a Black man, but he knew he was half Japanese, but the community that he grew up in was Black, but he was not around this conversation. So I think we all have to realize everyone comes at this from different angles and different perspectives. And that's just what I wanted to share about. So we didn't get it, descendants didn't get it, as you know. And even my father added that he wasn't sure if he would want to accept it. This is just he's no longer living. He might have, because he looked at things as tokenism too. And as a Black person, he knew that Blacks needed to be repaid, but how are they really going to do this with slavery, and how is the money really going to make a difference? So just something to think about.
Thank you, Regina. Okay, do folks have any questions that you want to put into this space before we get into the presentation? And then we'll also collect the cards, so we'll have people's questions too. Go ahead. Oh, okay.
Wow, thank you so much for all of your work. And I guess I'll just ask the question, there's so much going on right now and so much work that's been done. And what are some of the prevailing positions now within the Black community on this question of reparations? Because we understand about not being a monolith in our communities.
Yeah, I think in the presentation, we'll talk about that and also talk about different reparations, struggles and movements that are happening, since it's not just going to be one. There's so much reparations that's owed, so. Yes. All right. Who is doing this? All right. Everyone, all I have to say is you're very lucky to be in the presence of Miss Teresa Heath right here. She's leading. She's one of the people leading the movement. She has helped write so many of the different reparations bills and resolutions that we have, and is just such a wealth of information and knowledge, and also just an amazing person too. So appreciate you being here with us and being able to share.
Thank you, Mayor. Grateful to be with you all. I'm always just overcome with different emotions to bear witness to people who have lived through these horrors and are still here and are still standing. I know there are people that didn't make it here, right? And so I just want to honor that we're living and sharing breath in this space and how fortunate and privileged we are to be doing that. And so I come to this space, and personally invested in reparations for my own family legacies that I'm still trying to put all the pieces together, right? And that's part of the painful journey of the unknown. And who am I if I don't know who my people are and what my people have been through? So, we're gonna run through sort of the context of what are we talking about here when we are saying reparations. You clearly get the root word of this word, repair, which is a state of being. It's a process. It's a transformation. And it's not a transaction. It's not a one-time thing. So how do we embody reparations as a process, as a continuous cycle, in perpetuity, right? So even when we're reflecting on the reparations process for Japanese Americans, how can that be a state of being? Okay, there were payments and educational initiatives and things that came along with that process, but what more do our people need to be repaired? And so we're constantly asking that question in the context of Black reparations as well. Making amends. How do we restore a community back to the place prior to an injury? In some cases, that feels impossible, like this definition of restitution, right? I think of some of Los Madres in Colombia whose children were disappeared during the war, and their primary ask for reparations was to bring their children back. My child is dead, bring them back. And what did that process even entail for them to be brave enough to ask for that? Something that we would all think is impossible. But reparations is possible, and we know that to be so. There are technical definitions of reparations that United Nations has outlined for us. I will say even prior to the United Nations guidelines, though, people were defining what reparations meant for them. So I also don't want us to get lost in, these kind of more official colonial contexts where we need someone to define the legal definition of something before we act on it ourselves. But in this case, you have 5 forms that kind of encapsulate what is supposed to be full repair and what is often referred to as full repair by legacy Black reparations organizations such as National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America and COBRA, National African American Reparations Commission. Prior to that, the Republic of New Africa, right? So Julie, when you asked about what the different perspectives is on reparations, Republic of New Africa wanted succession of the South from the US, right? Some modern day calls, are different. But when we think about how radical this ask has been over centuries, some Black folks just want to live in peace on their own, within their own cooperative communities. Cessation and guarantees of non-repetition is just a fancy way of saying end the harm. Make sure that it is never repeated again. How do we ensure that the wrongful incarceration, displacement, and removal of peoples does not happen again? Sometimes that is going to require international or not international, legal and political reforms. Sometimes that means entire institutions that have served to dehumanize are, are remade, are destroyed and remade. So that's what we think about when we say guarantees of non-repetition. We talked a little bit about restitution, but I think restitution as well speaks to the return of specific familial artifacts. And I'm so curious to hear even any reflections and stories about that in this case of, your family members, yourself are taken from your homes without your belongings and property. Well, what happened to those family heirlooms? Did they stay there? Were they, I know in the case, we'll talk a little bit more about Tulsa. In the case of Tulsa, before houses were burned and people were killed in their homes were looted, right? And so just thinking about the familial artifacts and the art and the writing that has been stolen in this process as well, the need to return that back to its original owners. Compensation, any economically accessible damage, but also moral and spiritual damage. We've seen in the case of Indigenous and Aboriginal communities in Australia, winning a high court decision for compensation for their loss in their spiritual connection to land, right? So courts and communities are quantifying the loss of, this spiritual connection to lands and to properties, in addition to, the destruction and economically accessible damage. But that's just one component here. And that's why we emphasize the whole full repair. Satisfaction. We're more familiar with this kind of reparative action. So the memorials, the markers, the curriculums, an official apology, right? In the case of the Civil Liberties Act, that came with a formal apology. In the case of enslavement of Black people, forced labor, Jim Crow, current anti-Black discrimination, there is no formal apology for any one of those institutions, right? And so just thinking about what that means, but also thinking about what it means to be reminded, right? See a marker, know the space that you're walking on. And how sometimes that's not enough, right? We need the material reparation to accompany that. And then rehabilitation, what is this process of mending our psychological traumas, right? What we're passing down, how brave it is for each of you to speak and bring in your ancestor, but also how painful that can be, right? And we're sitting in this room, both with curiosity and appreciation for each other, but also with those shared pains. That should not be ignored. What reparations are not? I kind of made this comment earlier about reparations not being a transaction. So that will reverberate through movement. This actually comes from Movement for Black Lives' reparations toolkit, which a number of movement leaders contributed to. So it goes beyond, saying, let me pay your phone bill. That'll make it all right. It goes beyond the government's investments in HBCUs, right? These are land grant institutions that should exist and they should be well funded. That doesn't mean that that's what reparations should look like, right? That doesn't go deep enough into what is needed. Even thinking about, what these kind of I've seen an article in Forbes, for instance, that talks about interpersonal reparations and what that might mean. And so on Juneteenth, the federal holiday, send your Black friend $100, right? that's not reparations either. So as long as we're on the same page about that, we can move forward. But I also want to make a distinction, and often is the battle that we're caught up now in the fight for reparations is the government has a responsibility to its people, right? At least in theory. And here we are where we're having arguments, about civil rights legislation and policy and, people's access to social services and welfare programs and, access to their basic needs, healthcare, food, transportation, right? These are things that the government should already be providing. We know that it is systematically underfunded for communities of color, but that's the government's problem. And that should not be, reparations should not be confused with development. Reparations should not be confused with ordinary public policy of meeting people's basic rights. Reparations goes beyond that. But often we're seeing a huge conflation of that as we actually move forward towards, getting closer to our goal.
So,
We believe.
thank you so much, Teresa, that was incredible. We're gonna share some of the values that we have within the, as Japanese Americans, what we are coming to this movement for Black Reparations are. And then also just sharing more about, context on these different slides. So I think Akemi is doing the first one here.
Am I just reading this as we go?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we believe reparations are owed, long overdue, and possible. Reparations are owed. We need to recognize slavery as the foundation of this country and wealth built on the labor and bodies of enslaved people. We need to compensate the historical and ongoing destruction of Black property, assets, and lives. For example, Tulsa redlining and the GI Bill. We need to combat the wealth gap and ongoing harms. I'm just gonna read the quote really quickly. 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years of racist housing policy. Until we reckon with our compounding moral debts, America will never be whole. That's from Thomas Coates.
Okay, sorry. I also want to give, if any folks here have anything to add, like if you want to talk about the Tulsa genocide, massacre here.
Okay, so do you want me to?
Sorry, just to say, if folks want to chime in, the mics can't be on at the same time. So if you're speaking, press mute. Or if you're not speaking, press mute if you are speaking. And if it's red. Okay.
So I just wanted to give one example, like from my own family story, in terms of the GI Bill. For example, my grandfather Bill, and I heard other people in this room say they had family members that were part of the 442 Regimental Combat Team. For those, I think everyone knows it's all Japanese segregated troop, and that was really at the, in the front lines, really, taking the brunt of many of the battles during World War II. There was a lot of loss of life and a lot of injury. When you read my grandparents' love letters during the war, they're constantly referring to their life after the war and how they're going to, use the benefits of the GI Bill to get a low-income mortgage and live in the suburbs and start a family, and for my grandfather to get an education and become a journalist like he always dreamed of. And then when they got out of the war, they learned that actually Japanese Americans did not receive the same GI benefits as white veterans, which was just, another insult upon injury, after having been interned and coming out of internment to learn that. So just like that happened for Black soldiers as well. Black soldiers were not, did not get the benefits of the GI Bill. So it's another place of, I think, sort of discovery and solidarity and understanding their lives and understanding that, as non-white people, they were not going to get the same benefits. Do you want to go on to the next one?
So, I mean, the themes that we're sticking with here is reparations are long overdue. And there's a long history of reparations calls, right? Efforts to regain dignity, in addition to some sort of, material possession as well. So I just want to, at least before I go into the Tulsa work, which, that is a 103+ year struggle, right, for clear example of reparations. But I want to call out the name of Belinda Sutton in this room. If you don't know about Belinda Sutton, I would encourage you to, spend some time getting to know her story, petitioning the Commonwealth of Massachusetts while enslaved for, an income and winning, right? Being able to have the courage to do that in that state and still, being successful and potentially opening up the door for other people to have the same ask. I think it's also important that we honor the stories not documented. And so I'm often, when we do have examples, I'm glad that we have documented examples, but like we all know, so much of our histories and our attempts to humanize ourselves are not actually documented. And so I also want to honor that in this context here. But we're going to take a quick look at into Tulsa. And for those of you who are not familiar, sorry, I'm making circles. For those of you who are not familiar about the 1921, often referred to as the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Community members and myself would refer to this incident as a genocide of the Greenwood community, right? This was a documented, well thought out plan by the city, the state, the county, white business developers. This is all documented in notes and meeting notes ahead of the massacre, where they planned to exterminate the Greenwood community, which was majority Black. The history of Oklahoma is that there were a number of all Black towns that were able to be created as a result of oppression that Black folks faced during the Trail of Tears, and also being enslaved by Native American communities also in Oklahoma. And so a legalized treaty that allowed then land to be claimed as a result of that enslavement actually paved the way for neighborhoods like Greenwood to exist, right? We're talking about 40 square blocks, a city within a city, and a population of over 16,000 at its highest point, and 11,000 around the time of the massacre. And so we just had an opportunity to be in Tulsa during the commemoration period, so that May 31st, June 1st, over the course of 24 hours, imagine your entire neighborhood burned to the ground. The aftermath of the massacre being some of the lesser known, like you may have been exposed now to what the Tulsa Race Massacre was, but the aftermath is often not talked about as well. And there's a common histories we all share in that space, in that Following the dispossession and the burning of the community, Black Tulsans, the people that were, not able to flee, and were still picking up their belongings, were rounded up into concentration camps all across their neighborhoods, set up and manned by the county and by the Red Cross at the time, who responded to the first domestic incident they had ever responded to, because the city and county and state refused to intervene and provide any relief. In order to get out of the concentration camp, everyone had numbers and a green identification card. In order to be released from the camp, they had to be claimed by a white employer within the state of Oklahoma. And so you were only released then for exchange and exploitation of your labor. So just thinking about the little known history that we know even in that context, and how our histories are more intertwined than we realize. So we're gonna show a clip from a documentary. Justice for Greenwood is the lead organization supporting the 2 remaining living survivors at 110 years old, Leslie Benningfield Randall and Viola Ford Fletcher, who were children during the massacre. Justice for Greenwood has a lawsuit currently that is pending on appeal in the Oklahoma Supreme Court. Prior legal actions have failed because of what they call the statute of limitations, these time-barred restrictions on claims, though there is no statute of limitations on murder. And there has been no accountability, right? Not 1 ounce of accountability when it comes to who perpetrated, right? We're not just talking about a mob of random white people, right? We're talking about an organized mob, primarily led by city officials, county officials, and the Oklahoma National Guard. And so because of its exposure to the world, you have interesting partnerships like Lush Cosmetics, which you may be familiar with, who partnered with Justice for Greenwood to do a short documentary that tells more of the real story. We have so many people coming to the Tulsa community that are not interested in telling the full, authentic, raw story, right? And these kinds of partnerships are important for us not to sanitize what is happening in Tulsa. I was actually born in Tulsa. I did not grow up there, but my parents very much survived while there, very much because of some of the remaining survivors that were alive in the early 1990s. So it's certainly full circle, half circle, something. I'm trying to figure that out, to then come back to this work in 2016 when Terrence Crutcher was killed by Tulsa police with his hands up in the air, pleading for his life. Terrence Crutcher and his twin sister Tiffany Crutcher are descendants of Rebecca Brown Crutcher, who escaped from the massacre. So imagine the same police department that carries out the destruction of your community circles back around and adds additional destruction to your life. So that's why I'm called and brought to this work, and I hope we can have a few minutes with this film, and hope you all enjoy it.
Since the 1830s, Black Creek Indians came on a Trail of Tears. I grew up here in North Tulsa, went to school right down the street here on Greenwood. Then I went to Booker T. Washington High School. And I went to University of Oklahoma. I remember sitting in Intro to African American Studies class when I first really learned about the massacre in Greenwood. I reluctantly raised my hand and said, I'm from North Tulsa and that's not true. And of course I was wrong. And it was just an embarrassing moment to realize that I didn't know my own history of my own community.
People from all over the country would ask, where are you from? And I would say Tulsa, Oklahoma. And people would say, Black Wall Street, Tulsa race riot. And I was a bit embarrassed because I had no clue what they were talking about.
Now we call it the massacre, after we've later learned what actually took place.
My grandfather said, have a seat. I survived the massacre. Man, when he told me that, I felt like somebody had just stacked a boulder on my shoulders. How is it I didn't know this?
I said, that's what Aunt Janie would talk about. And we thought Aunt Janie was just nuts, you know? And no, she was traumatized. And if that was my Aunt Janie, I could only imagine all the other survivors.
Oh, my name is, my maiden name is let's see, Benningfield.
You don't look 109.
I don't look 109.
No, ma'am.
I don't?
No.
Well, for goodness sake, thank you.
I'm still amazed. I'm still in shock. I have anger issues at sometimes because I cannot believe what she went through. And it's been swept under the rug like it didn't happen.
So May 30th, Dick Rowland, a young teenage shoeshine boy, went to the Drexel building to use the restroom. It was the only place that a colored person could use the bathroom then. He tripped going into the elevator. Well, Sarah Page screams and word gets out. But the word that gets out is that Dick Rowland had just tried to rape Sarah Page in the elevator in broad daylight on a holiday. Well, later that evening, Dick Rowland is barricaded in the top floor of the courthouse building. About 6,000 angry white men assemble here. An incident happens where a white man fights with a black man over a gun. The gun goes off. All mayhem breaks loose.
When you talk about the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, you're talking about the worst act of domestic terrorism in the history of this country. And it was done by the whole white society. You know, a lot of times we want to say a white mob. No, it was white Tulsa. You're talking about 38 to 40 city blocks burnt down to the ground. 8 to 10,000 people made homeless overnight. 3,000 people dead and or disappeared, never to be heard from again. Over $200 million in property damage destroyed. And when I say that number, that big number, we're talking over 1,500 homes and businesses destroyed. You're talking about people seeing and smelling the flames as they escape for their lives.
So this image is everything. First place in American history where citizens of the
Yeah, I'm, it doesn't matter how many times I, watch a documentary, hear the reflections, it still is completely, unnerving, sad to, have to witness 110-year-old Black women pleading for any ounce of justice, right? We recently lost Hughes Van Ellis, who was 102, a veteran of multiple wars, who testified before Congress saying, please don't let me leave this earth without justice. I served my country in all the ways that I've served my country in all these ways. My country needs to serve me back. So I am just, grateful that you all got to bear witness to that. And this last point here around delaying justice, that has added more injury to the original injuries, right? The denial of justice is an atrocity in and of itself. And so we have active reparations efforts happening now. That would include, you may have seen the news of Evanston, Illinois, who was focusing on a very narrowed harm of local zoning codes, so discriminatory codes within the Evanston neighborhoods that have affected Black residents. So they are giving out housing grants as well as other services to repair that harm. In the case of Chicago reparations for police torture, that's one of our most comprehensive examples of reparations, at least for Black people in this country. A torture ring in the 70s and 80s conducted by John Burge, led to the death and to the full dehumanization and injury of so many Black men primarily in Chicago. As a result of their struggles for a few decades, they were able to get payments as well as build a trauma-informed hospital that all of the survivors and the families get free rehabilitative care from. There's also a curriculum in all of Chicago's middle school and high schools, mandatory, that has yet to be rolled back, right? But let's also contextualize this in the moment that we're in, that everything is up for grabs, everything could be undone if we don't redo and if we don't stick with it. But in their curriculum, they not only teach about the torture ring, they teach about why reparations was the appropriate remedy as well. So you have high school and middle school students learning that as well. In the case of Bruce's Beach, there was a properties within Manhattan Beach, California, that belonged to a well-known Black family, the Bruce family in California. The county, LA County, then returned those parcels of land back to the Bruce family as a form of reparation. And so we're having this conversation too about what are reparations, how does your family feel? Well, the Bruce family petitioned to get that land back. And they also made the choice of then selling the land back to the county for the monetary value that it was worth. And so I think it's also important that we honor each individual family's choice of what this means for them. And in the case of the Bruce family, the land was important, and in order to restore their family in a way that they thought they needed to restore them, they then put that land back into the county's possession. Germany, in the case of Germany, I just think, even in this room and beyond, Holocaust survivors and their heirs and their spouses are continuing to get reparations payments to this day. The Claims Conference of Material Claims negotiates with the German government, month after month, to add additional resources, legal services, education services, birthright trips, rehabilitation programs. And no one is questioning those amounts. No one is questioning whether that is the right thing to do. And I think it's important, even in this context, and in the case of Japanese Americans and the war, heirs and descendants were not eligible for redress or for reparations in that case. And so we have models that have a company, have directly prescribed that descendants and heirs and spouses, because there's a recognition that your descendants are going to inherit these traumas and have to deal and process them as well. And so as we continue our advocacy efforts, I hope that we point to current examples and make the argument that descendants need to be within, whatever comprehensive reparations package there is, they need to be included and not excluded from that. Because the harm transcends just one person. Land back initiatives, also in California, there's been redistribution of land. There's actually a long history of the United States government giving back lands to wholly inadequate, right, in context to the genocide and total dispossession, right? Even when you think about, the concentration camps, that's only made possible if there was dispossession of indigenous lands. That's only made possible as a result of the Homestead Acts that doles out all that hundreds and hundreds of acres of land to white landowners that then gets used for these acts of racial violence in the aftermath. And so we often point to some of the land back efforts and are having conversations also between Black and Indigenous communities about what does it mean to even, whose land is it? And, having these heartfelt conversations about, what does restoration of our groups look like, and what does restoration look like in terms of partnership together. And of course, we've heard about and we'll continue to hear about the Japanese Americans fight for reparations. And I've learned so much from that process as well. Pitfalls to avoid, strategies that were helpful, right? The support of the grassroots of the larger process, right? Without an NCRR, is this process even possible, right? And so just thinking too about how each of us has a role in this, whether we want that role or not, we have a responsibility.
Thank you so much for all that information, Jason. I learned so much from, you in general, but also hearing you today. Yeah.
We're gonna go pretty fast through the rest of the program, but I wanted to mention that in California, but have you heard about the AB 3121 legislation which established a commission or a task force on to study and make recommendations for Black reparations in California. And we thought we'd bring this up because for me, it's just the interaction and the connecting the dots between our struggle and the struggle for Black reparations today. And I didn't mention prior to this, but Congressman Mervyn Dimely, who was the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus during our struggle for reparations, was just a solid ally. He even introduced a bill calling for immediate restitution, which did not pass because the commission to establish wartime relocation and internment civilians was formed. But he was a staunch ally. When the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 was passed in 1988, the very next year, Congressman John Conyers introduced H.R. 40, based upon the commission that we had calling for a commission on Black reparations. Now he introduced that bill every year, and since 1989. And we're still fighting for that to get passed. But California, the state started taking action rather than to wait on federal. So the state established the AB 3121 Commission with 9 commissioners. And one commissioner was Japanese American Don Tamaki. And he played a real positive role, and there was a lot of solidarity built through that. This photo was taken when the commission had a panel on Japanese American reparations, and more unity was built from that. And right now, there's a strong coalition being built, the Alliance for Reparations and Reconciliation. Truth. And that is a multi-ethnic coalition that is working to on many things, but in particular, and a huge report came out. It was infallible in coming out with many recommendations. The 2 Black legislators that were on the task force have introduced 83 pieces of legislation to begin to address some of the recommendations. And ARRT, working with communities like the Japanese American community, other AAPI communities, is working together in solidarity to move this forward.
Thank you, Mia. So we have information on different reparations movements and struggles that are going on internationally, federally, and on the state and local level, but we want to also have time for conversation. So I think we can probably just, share out slides with folks after. But before we do that, I also really wanted to give Dreesen the space to share more about the Tulsa reparations movement. What are the asks, and also how we can support, since we learned about that today.
Thank you, Emily. So as I mentioned, there is a lawsuit currently pending the Oklahoma Supreme Court's decision. It was just recently kicked out of the Oklahoma District Court and dismissed. And so this step with the Oklahoma Supreme Court is an appeal on the behalf of the survivors. We are still awaiting the Oklahoma Supreme Court's decision. It was actually a monumental hearing altogether. In the case of the Tulsa Race Massacre, and as living survivors and descendants, no legal case has actually moved forward to discovery. So it's always been dismissed. And so these are efforts at, right following 1921, these are efforts in the 40s. When they decided to run the I-244 highway through the Greenwood community, there were lawsuits after that, displacing descendants from the area. And then in the early 2000s, there was a civil case led by the late Charles Ogletree, Johnny Cochran, and others. DeMario Solomon Simmons, who you saw on the film, was a baby lawyer as a part of that crew. You have Eric Miller, prolific lawyers in this space, fighting against a legal system that doesn't want to recognize these Black folks' humanity. And so I do want to highlight two efforts by State Representative Regina Goodwin, who is also a descendant of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Her family is a famous family within the Greenwood historical recollection, on the Oklahoma Eagle, one of the longest standing Black newspapers in the country. And her efforts have highlighted, one, she's introduced bills that have not been successful in a very red, very conservative, very anti-Black legislature. She is still pushing forward. She's introduced bills like a revolving victims compensation fund that have not passed the muster of the chambers, but what has is her scholarship bill. So in the context of Tulsa, there was a state commission that recommended that reparations were the right thing to do in 2001, that actually was the catalyst then for the lawsuits, because it was like, all right, you all are admitting to this, you just did a full investigation, all your culpability is documented, there's no ands, ifs, or buts about this. And in that recommendation, reparations are the right thing to do, reparations for the survivors, reparations for the financial compensation. And then in addition to that, scholarships for the living survivors and descendants, because their schools were destroyed as well. Access to education loss then travels throughout these families. And so she has done an incredible job keeping the scholarship trust actually funded and then actually going to descendants. Originally, just a few years ago, well, a few decades ago, they actually cut the requirement for descendants to be the first recipients of these scholarships. So the state cut that requirement. And instead, anybody who knew the history of Greenwood could apply, right? Obviously, that is not a targeted remedy, and that is not reparative in any way. So she's fought to get the descendant eligibility preferential, you know what I'm saying, back into the bill, and has also advocated for full-time scholarships. So 2 people this past year got full-time scholarships. Believe it or not, and this is just ridiculous to me, they were only giving out $1,000 scholarships, and to maximum 12 people a year. So you ain't even buying your books with $1,000. And so there are also efforts at the city, potentially, as we move towards this mayoral administration moving out. You know, in Tulsa, it's a real sinister place of coordinated power. And so a lot of these families have been in political power for decades. Finally, we will have someone moving out that has possessed that power for generations in the mayoral position. And so maybe there's going to be a glimmer of hope at the city level. But ultimately, and I'm also working with Eric Miller and others on federal bills. So, you know, in the event, well, in addition to actually, because the federal government could have also intervened in the case of the massacre, right? And instead they, you know, there was recognition and then they signed off on getting the Red Cross there, and that was it. So we're also working on bills for a revolving victim compensation fund and revitalization of the Greenwood area, including a study of the removal of the I-244 highway as a part of these efforts. And so there's so much community organizing there, Terrence Crutcher Foundation, Justice for Greenwood, so many different, you know, so much activity. And so there are gonna be numerous places for you all to plug in and support if that's where your heart is leading you. But ultimately, if reparations don't happen in Tulsa, they're not gonna happen anywhere for any Black folks in this country. This is the most documented massacre that we know of, right? Because this is happening in the context of other Black communities being massacred all across the country. And so when you think about the most photographed massacre, right? The white perpetrators would sell postcards of the destruction to monetize the massacre after it happened. This is the most documented massacre. You see the faces of the white mob in these photos and yet no accountability. So Tulsa is ground zero for Black reparations, and that's why you know, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to share with you all.
Sorry for our little chatter in the back. Yeah, we heard amazing information from Dreesen, and other folks who helped plan this workshop. And it was also great to, hear some folks' questions and thoughts on the reparations, the redress movement earlier during this workshop too. So after all, you heard today, I think it's important for us to reflect on why should Japanese Americans support reparations? And what are the different ways that it's important for us to show up in solidarity? So does anyone want to share a response to why should Japanese Americans support reparations, or what you're thinking about as it relates to supporting the movement for Black reparations?
I'd like to say just a few words of acknowledgement. It took a long, long time before the Japanese became aware that they should protest. I think the Japanese way was to put their head down and try to forget it. But I think we saw the civil rights movement, and I think we owe a great deal of debt to the communities that supported the civil rights movement. I think without the civil rights movement, the Japanese would not have asked for redress. And I think we need to remind our communities who helped us, who went before us and demanded their rights, because that gave us the power, or the, I'm not looking for the right word for it, but I think that we really owe a debt to those who fought for our civil rights. And when I think of what happened with the civil rights movement, it really humbles me, because of all the terrorism that people suffered when they fought for civil rights. And whites fought for civil rights. It would not have occurred without the white participation too. But I'm glad that the Japanese community realizes that. And I think it also took asking not just for an apology, but until a dollar amount was put on it, nobody paid attention to it. It doesn't mean anything in the United States unless you ask for money. And I think that but we had people who went before us, who set the example for us, and we need to be, it's just really acknowledged.
Thank you. The JACL adopted the resolution at the National Convention in 1970, which was held in Chicago. Raymond Uno of the Northern California District, who was also involved in the repeal of the Internal Security in 1950, is the one who really introduced the resolution for JACL. It took 2 years for JACL to figure out where to begin. And what we found out, it took 18 years, by the way, from 1970 to August of 1988 to get anything done. The first part was just to educate our own people, because the Issei never talked about it. The Sansei knew nothing about it in those days. And the big issue was we had so many opinions as to what to do. Some people said, forget the money. Some people said the money was important. Some people said, well, we just want the apology. Some people said we want both. Then some people said, well, according to the Bank of California, the actual loss in 1988 was about $3.5 billion, and everybody who was in camp should get $40,000, dead or alive. And that was the original request that was made. And as you're aware, then it became $20,000 to anybody who was still living on August of 1988. But the hardest part was, how do we educate the American public? First of all, we didn't know what we wanted to do. Our community is very divided. So Senator Issei is the one who came up with the idea of creating this commission. and the commission held hearings throughout the country. And they came up with a recommendation about redress and reparations. So when the congressman, who didn't have any backbone at all, who really were convinced to support it, said, hey, this is a federal commission that recommended this. It wasn't some community group, it was a federal commission, and that was their excuse, if you want to call it that, or their logic for supporting the legislation for the money and the apology. But it took 18 years, and the big question is, I remember being I was on the initial committee for JSL, and they're saying, so what if you guys do it, what about the blacks? What about the Native Americans? We said, well, that'd be great. That we could be sort of a process for other groups to go through the same thing that we're going through. This is back in the 1970s. But it's a long process. The hardest part is to get our own community to agree on what should be done. And it sounds like the local idea of the Tulsa massacre, I think, is one way. Has there been any movement to make that into a federal memorial? Has there been any initial to do that? Because to me, you need something that's tangible. If you try to name it as a federal memorial, then there's going to be a lot of discussion. And we found out that the discussion about our reparation and redress became a process of newspapers educating the American public what really went on. And I don't know if that might be one way to do it, because when you start talking about money in the beginning, it's kind of hard to push. But if you get something that's more spiritual, we need to put a memorial here what took place, and we need federal dollars or somebody to do it, to remember, and have the Congress pass a resolution to do something like that. And that's more tangible in terms of, to me, of a process of educating the American public.
Thank you. I think as Dreesen mentioned, and as we share on our presentation, there's so many different parts of reparations, right? So, we want all of those pieces that were listed in the presentation. Okay. All right. And also okay, we can have a couple more. Just a reminder, so we really want to hear reflections on why do you think Japanese Americans should support reparations?
Thank you. I apologize being out of the heat and humidity all morning. Tired the heck out of my wife and myself, so I finally dragged myself down here about half an hour ago, so I missed most of this good stuff. I would like to associate myself as a politician, say, with the two previous speakers, Ross and the gentleman from. When the first gentleman spoke, I would like to say that. Okay, when the first gentleman spoke, I would like to say, it's very true. Everything what we stand upon is based upon what African Americans struggled through and achieved. Where Asian Americans in particular are concerned, we owe a hell of a lot to the Chinese who came before us and hired a bunch of good lawyers to prove that we were people. Whereas Ross got involved with big efforts like reparations and redress, my wife and I spend most of our spare time working on small things. So after we returned to San Francisco in the late 1970s, we joined a little project called the Committee for Internment Credit. And that was based upon a California law that gave Issei, who were fired by the state government, the rights back. Now, what we were going for, and we just joined them after we came back from overseas, was that every Issei who worked for the federal government was de facto employees for the time they spent in camps. So by the 1970s, the movement was to try to give them retirement credit added to their years of service if they were a postal or federal employee. Now there was just 12 people working on this. We got the law passed and signed by Jimmy Carter in 1980, 81, I think it was. And from that, some people say that it formed a tiny pebble in the argument for reparations, if a dozen people can get this, can get this act passed, maybe something better could happen. Nobody remembers this. Currently, a graduate student is writing his thesis about this sort of thing. One outcome of this was that there was one right-wing Republican who was on the House Post Office and Civil Service Committee who acted like he was all in favor of it. And just when it came to the final committee meeting, he pulled our people out into the hall and said, if you don't put an age limit on this thing, I'm not going to vote for it. Oh. So, of course, most Issei were under 21 when they were in camp. So he was going to put, he made us put a limit of 21 years or older is countable. So many Issei lost out time on their credit. My father was in his late 20s when he was in camps. So he got like 2 years and 4 months of credit added to his retirement. Now, what happened to us, we were civil servants, but we didn't get anything because we were not even in camp. But that particular congressman was a carpetbagger who went all over California running for election. 10 years ago, he ran against an Asian American, Ami Bera. And he lost, no, Ami Bera won by about, I don't know, several thousand votes out of the whole thing. Yeah. So let me just give one sentence. So we worked on Ami Bera's campaign, and Dan Lundgren was defeated and was never heard from again. So little things can add up to other things. It's like this ripples. So whatever you want, by all means, do this. Thank you.
I think we could hear from two folks, but just keep. I just have this one statement and one question.
Okay, as many of you know, I am married to an African American. And I'm just glad to see so many Japanese organizations plus other Asian organizations come out in support of Blacks and Black Lives Matter, but more importantly, Black Reparations. So that's my statement. But my question is, since we're running very late, is there a website where we could go on where we can find out what us little people, old people, young people, what we can do to help the cause?
And Leah is passing out cards, and all the people with the QR code, that's got a lot of information on it, the QR code. I'm gonna pass out cards here too. Could you take my pass?
So I'll just share a little bit from the Philadelphia perspective. So I organized around Black Asian Solidarity in Philly, and being Asian American, being Japanese American in Philadelphia, a majority Black city, is a very different context than most other places in the United States. Living there for the last 15 years has really taught me everything I know and understand about what it is to have a racialized experience in the United States after growing up in a almost 98% white community in rural suburban Connecticut. Just being in community and fellowship with African Americans and struggling in different social justice movements. But most importantly, over the last 4 or 5 years, getting more involved with Black Reparations specifically, I'd just like to share maybe a couple practical ideas for moving it forward if people are interested in doing this kind of work. Most of our work has taken place in 2 different spaces, in sort of a cultural and community organizing space, and also in sort of the more direct action and legislative space within Philadelphia City Council. So we recently were able to get the Philadelphia City Council to pass a Black Reparations Task Force, which happened in, I think, June of last year. On Juneteenth, they announced it. And recently, the task force has publicly announced the 9 commissioners that they have on the task force and hosted their first public hearing session. Every step of the way, Japanese Americans have been there to support this effort, to speak when we're asked to speak, to share the experience of what it means to have among us incarceration survivors that can speak personally about what receiving reparations meant for them. For the descendants, including myself, of people who received reparations, to talk about that no, it doesn't cure everything. It's not a magic bullet. It's not going to end the trauma or the intergenerational pain. And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to repair beyond that, but it's a starting point for conversation. And we wouldn't be having this conversation if the redress movement hadn't happened. Most of us probably wouldn't be on a pilgrimage if the redress movement hadn't happened, because this was sort of a groundbreaking moment for our community to fully understand and be vindicated in what happened to us was truly institutionally racist, and that the United States government was willing to apologize for it. So, it's a starting point for anything, right? And I think, if anything, the longer I've been doing this kind of work, the more I understand that you just need to listen to people and get to know them. And that's why the cultural and community stuff is so important, because if you don't know who you're organizing with, how can you possibly organize for collective liberation? You have to really know each other and really become friends and allies, and then you can kind of do this work in collective liberation.
All right. Thank you for everyone's reflections. And then also just to quickly read off the slide. So some of the things we were in this planning group were thinking about. So why should Japanese Americans support reparations? To recognize our shared history of racism, to resist being used as a wedge to divide communities of color, to honor our long history of solidarity and fighting injustice. And yeah, to also be reflecting on what does it mean to for never again and to stop repeating history, and how that's only possible if we really address the systemic racism at its roots. So
I just want to make sure this is a logistical thing, because I know at the end we're driving over, but if everybody signed in, at least we can keep in touch with you. Did everybody need to sign this? Okay. And the questions up here, I think we got to most of them, and some of them are still being answered. So if you didn't get your question answered, please talk to any of us, and especially Jason, who's here. Okay.
While Dreesen talks about Lush, we have some gift bags for people, and we were going to give it to survivors. And I know Ron over there is a survivor.
And this lady here, the first one.
Okay. So, so Dreesen, maybe you could just talk.
well, Teresa you did share about Lush, but
But I guess I'll also say that right here.
Anyone else? Uh-oh.
Give it the hand, Gary.
I don't know if
Well, in all 205 Lush Cosmetic stores, currently, you can buy a soap that will benefit Justice for Greenwood. There is political education material in there. Lush Cosmetics also launched a reparations campaign, the first of any kind, on May 31st. So you can actually, even if you just Google Lush reparations, there's a Reparations 101 article that I contributed to, as well as other leaders in the movement. And, it's amazing to see corporate, socially conscious and actual, corporate sponsors that want to actually be in community and true partnership with folks. So these bags, are the Justice for Greenwood product is not in that bag, but Lush has been fortunate to donate things to us. I also just want to respond to the National Monument comment as well. There are efforts by the Terrence Crutcher Foundation currently to establish Greenwood as a national monument. There have been efforts for the last 6 decades to do that. And I want to honor the pros and cons and the potential aftermath of what that looks like to, then give the federal government some sort of control of what the Black community already is struggling to control. So I want to honor the efforts of my dear sister and the Crutcher Foundation. You can go to their website and sign the petition. There's an active petition, both with Terrence Crutcher Foundation as well as Justice for Greenwood, who is also, in addition to the case, petitioning the Department of Justice to open up its first criminal investigation into the massacre and the aftermath.
Thank you. All right. So, we had plans. We had plans of doing small group conversations, but we can continue to, actually, folks should be talking to each other about reparation. It doesn't have to be just here. So, I encourage you all this weekend to continue the conversation. I know that this was before the official event even began, right? So we want to be able to bring this information to the folks throughout this whole weekend. And yes.
Well, you were saying that we do have slots open in the evenings, and possibly we can set a particular day or night, and we can continue this conversation, and we can do the small stuff that you're talking about.
Do you want to talk about the keynote speaker tonight?
Mia asked if we want to
Just announce who
our
keynote speaker tonight is.
Yes, we'll have the amazing Kemi Kochiyama, who will be the keynote speaker tonight. It'll be such an honor to, be recognizing the work that Kemi's done and the work also of your family and your family's legacy too. But you also, as your own person who's doing this work. And yeah, to continue to acknowledge the Black and Asian solidarity that's been happening for decades. It's not just now, but it's been going on for a long time. So yeah, very excited to hear what you have to share tonight.
I appreciate all of you that have come here, not to this workshop, but just come to Rohwer, and you're keeping the legacy alive, and it means so much to so many people. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Just to say briefly, we have this slide about how you can take action. There's so many different ways, including learning more, but also how to get involved in this work. And yeah, we have a QR code in case anyone wants to pull out your phone and do it, but we can also, it's also on the cards that Kathy.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, so there's so many opportunities. Yes, exactly, yeah, sorry. So the QR code will tell you, we'll cover this last slide.
In fact, it has too much information.
Yeah, so. Can we get these slides? You can add the slides to the Google Doc. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all.